geopolitics.
Do you think the people who drove this in Washington, D.C., who helped spark the Ukrainian crisis, who backed the coup, who I guess had visions of bringing Ukraine into NATO, as crazy as that sounds, do you think that they're willing to give ground, and do you think that they can be overcome here?
It would be a struggle because their perspective is what's bad for Russia is good for us. So this kind of reasoning. Right? And we went through this during the previous Cold War. And after the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a kind of, I wouldn't say transformation of American thinking about that Cold War, but a shift where you began to see more and more important people, that is, people who could influence policy, whether they're in media or politics or whatever, beginning to say maybe it's time for us to think more about what we have in common, what we can do together, because that was really dangerous, the Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, we almost went to war with Russia. We need some galvanizing force like that, I guess, and I'm afraid it might come. I mean, I can imagine easily. I mean, my anxiety, which I talk about in this book, War with Russia, ? Is a Cuban Missile Crisis-like situation between the United States and Russia. Not in Cuba, but it could be in Syria, could be in Ukraine, where we're eyeball to eyeball militarily, right? One can imagine something going wrong or not going wrong by intent, by provocation, because there are a lot of provocateurs out there running false flag operations. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but false flag operations exist. So say we get into a Cuban Missile Crisis-like situation. Kennedy had all the leeway he needed, and did Khrushchev, the Soviet leader then, to negotiate us away from war. Would Trump? Stop and think. Here's Trump, who's routinely and pointlessly and idiotically referred to as a Russian puppet, right? That hasn't gone away. I still get campaign solicitations from Democrats that say, send me to Congress so I can get rid of the Russian puppet. And this lingers like a cancer in the system. It's a malignancy. But imagine this crisis. And it's easy to imagine. In Syria, in Ukraine, wherever we're eyeball to eyeball, militarily with Russians. We now ask Trump to do what Kennedy did, to negotiate with Khrushchev's successor, Putin, away from war. Would Trump be permitted, even if Trump knows how to do it, would he be permitted to do it? Because a large part of the American political class says Trump is not a legitimate president. To say that, and there's no reason to say it, by the way, there's no evidence that he isn't by our rules legitimate, but to say that and keep saying it, then you have to ask yourself, and what if it came to a Cuban Missile-like crisis? Would he be legitimate enough to negotiate the way Kennedy did away from war? I think about that really often.
Well, let me ask you then quickly as we wrap, is part of this the point then, is the aim of portraying Trump as this Russian puppet, is the utility of that for these people to actually take away his ability to make peace and make détente with Russia?
I think there's probably a small faction in Washington that really likes Cold War, and the more the better with Russia. Whether it's for economic reasons, they sell a lot of weapons, whether because they were raised that way ideologically, whether because Russophobia is a major factor in American politics, whether because they have, I don't want to denigrate anybody, they have a lot of Ukrainians in their constituency where they're from for whatever reason. But it is exceedingly dangerous and getting more dangerous by the week, by the day. Trump has to be free in a crisis to negotiate as a legitimate president on behalf of the United States. And a crisis could come at any time. And if he's not, all bets are off. I mean, I have to say to you, Aaron, that in 4, maybe more decades of studying Russia, studying Russian-American relations, I never really took seriously the possibility of war between the United States and Russia. I never thought it was ever had a high probability. Today I think it's a very high probability. Partly because of this Russiagate nonsense. Partly because of the lack of American leadership. And I guess you could call it a Putin apologist, but I will say again, as I've said to you on other occasions, that what Putin came to power to do was to modernize Russia. And that does not involve Cold War with the West, period, end of story. That's his mission. He wants to go down in history as the man who did this. Cold War, not to mention hot war, is spoiling what he sees as his mission. He's there for the having. And even if Trump wants to do it, it's not clear he knows how to do it, or that the people around him would advise him or even permit him to do it. It's not clear. Even with the departure of Fiona Hill and some of the other hawkish members of his administration. Because we have to remember that the one area where an American president really has almost, not autocratic, but exclusive powers making foreign policy. Short of doing a treaty, there's almost nothing. Use a double negative they can't do, for better or worse. And there's a golden moment now to be had for everybody's security. And it's being forwarded by this mindless, I mean, you can hate on Trump all you want, but there's got to be a higher priority, and that's got to be international American security. And we're letting that opportunity slip away, I fear.
Stephen F. Cohen, Professor Emeritus of Russian Studies at Princeton and NYU, author of several books, including his latest, War with Russia, From Putin and Ukraine to Trump and Russiagate. Professor, thank you.
Thank you. Always good.